part back there. So if you will just fill out your name and address on there, and if you know your item number, you can put it on there, and then when it's time, we'll call you up. So. Okay. All right.
Let me. Yes.
At 6:30 p.m., I'm going to call the meeting to order. And Renee, could I please have a roll call?
Mr. Brewer,
Here.
Mr. Parker,
Here.
Ms. McCowan. Here. Mr. McDaniel,
Here.
Ms. Byrd,
Here.
Mr. McClure, Mr. Griffith,
Here.
Mr. Axton, Mr. Jablonski.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Moving to consent docket, I'm going to read the items, and starting with item number 1, consideration of approval, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of the minutes of the August 11, 2022 regular Planning Commission meeting. Then we have 2 certificates of survey. Item 2, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of COS-2223-2, consideration of a Norman Rule Certificate of Survey submitted by Pete and Jennifer Jackson, Stonewall Homes, LLC, Pathfinder Surveying for Sunset Hills for approximately 50.717 acres of property generally located on the east side of 60th Avenue Northeast, approximately a half-mile north of East Rock Creek Road, with variances for Tract 4 in the 250-foot frontage requirement and the 330-foot minimum front building setback width requirement. Item number 3, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of COS-2223-3, consideration of a Norman Rule Certificate of Survey submitted by Daniel and Jackie Alexander, Macbacks Land Surveying, PLLC, for J&D Acres for 17.942 acres of property generally located on the north side of East Tecumseh Road, approximately a half-mile east of 108th Avenue Northeast. And we have a preliminary plat, item 4, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of PP-2223-2, consideration of a preliminary plat submitted by W.H. Normandy Creek, LP, Wallace Design Collective, for lots 2 and 3, Block 1, Jennings Estates North 1 Addition, a replat of part of Block 1, Jennings Estates Number 1 Addition for 5.2 acres of property generally located near the southeast corner of West Main Street and 24th Avenue Southwest. Does any member of the commission wish to remove any item from the consent docket? Okay. Does any member of the audience wish to remove any item from the consent docket? And if so, which item would be pulled? Seeing none, I would take a motion to approve as presented.
I make a motion to approve as presented.
And a second?
Second.
And a vote.
You may vote. Everyone has voted, and the motion carried 7-0.
Moving to non-consent items, I'm going to read items 5 and 6 together. Item number 5, consideration of adoption, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of resolution number R-2223-30, Zafar Beg requests amendment of the Norman 2025 Land Use and Transportation Plan to remove the parcel from the Special Enterprise Zone retaining country residential designation for 5 acres of property located at 4000 East Robinson Street. And item number 6, consideration of adoption, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of ordinance number O-2223-9, Zafar Beg requests rezoning from PUD Planned Unit Development O-0607-36 to A1 General Agricultural District for 5 acres of property generally located at 4000 East Robinson Street. And I'll take the staff presentation, and apologies, I'm sure I did not pronounce that name correctly.
Hi, I'm Logan Hubble with the Planning Department. So we have an application from Zafar Beg for a Norman 2025 Land Use and Transportation Plan Amendment to remove the property from a special enterprise zone and a rezoning to A1 General Agricultural District located at 4000 East Robinson Street. Here's a look at the the current Norman 2025 Land Use and Transportation Plan designation for that property, which is country residential, and it will be remaining in that country residential designation. It's only being removed from the special enterprise zone. And this site is zoned PUD planned unit development currently, and is 5 acres in area. To the north is A2 Rural Agricultural District and I1 Light Industrial District zoning. To the east and to the south is A2 Rural Agricultural District zoning, and to the west is a PUD planned unit development. The current land use for this site is vacant. To the north and south are single-family residential lots. To the east is a church, and to the west is a wellness treatment facility. The applicant wishes to construct a house, a barn, and an animal pen. Here's the aerial photography. And then here is this is a look at the site from East Robinson. Here's a look away from the site, across the street, across East Robinson. Here's a look east, down East Robinson. And here's a look west from the front of the site down East Robinson. And then finally, here's a site plan. And it shows the house and the animal barn. Staff forwards this request for rezoning from PUD, planned unit development, to A1, General Agricultural District, as ordinance number O2223-9 for consideration by the Planning Commission and a recommendation to City Council.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Seeing none, I would take an applicant presentation, but I believe the applicant was not here. Is that correct? So any audience comments? Any other Planning Commission discussion? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion
Move to approve.
Second.
and a vote.
You may vote. Everyone has voted, and the motion carried 7-0.
Moving to item number 7, consideration of adoption, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of ordinance number O-2223-10. Ronald K. Dodgen requests closure of vacation of a portion of Creston Way located between Lot 4, Block 7, and Lot 1, Block 8 of Hanley Addition. And I will take that staff presentation.
Good evening. As you've indicated, the applicant has made a request to close a portion of Creston Way located east of Tolley Drive. Staff can support this request for the following reasons. There is no public street or paving located within this right-of-way. The property to the east has principal access to 12th Avenue, and also the property to the east, at such time as it is proposed to be developed, it's anticipated that it will be commercial to reflect what's to the north of it and what's to the south of it. Thereby, it would not be in the best interest for commercial activity to access through the residential neighborhood. The applicant's representative does have a presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for staff?
I have a question. So if the right-of-way is given up, who owns that piece of land?
It will be determined by the judge, district court.
Well, who are the options for owning it?
Typically, it will be split on both lots, one to the north and the one to the south.
I see.
Historically, the way that would typically work is 50% to each side of the neighboring owners, but it could be done differently depending on how it's handled. And I'm sure our applicant can give us a little bit more information on that too. The other I guess, note on there is the easement on there. So as far as ownership would be different from use, and then the use would continue by easement is how I read it. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
For the utility companies that are there.
Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, I take the applicant presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Sean Rieger for the applicant tonight. And I'll take you quickly through just a few images here. There you see the tract is the shaded area there. And you can see this is basically a dead-end road on the ends here of Tully Drive. And then Creston Way goes back up. As Mr. Danner said, it is an access point that is not really paved. You can see some really dilapidated paving right there in the right-of-way, and then to the east is a heavily treed path. This was done back in 1956, I believe, mid-50s, so it's been almost 70 years. This has been a platted right-of-way that's never been used. So we are proposing to vacate it, as Mr. Danner said, when and if this develops, if this goes commercial, which is highly likely on the front edge of 12th Avenue. We really don't want that traffic coming back through into this neighborhood on a little dead-end street. And I think what could happen is, what you see often in these kind of situations is a busy intersection up at Alameda and 12th. And if you connect that through, you will see cut-through traffic to avoid that intersection, which is something we really don't want to happen long into the future. So it's heavily treed. It's you can see it right there, not used at this point in any way. So staff supports it. I do understand there's a protest now that has come in the past few days, which is the property owner, I understand, to the east. We're open to maintaining a pedestrian or a bicycle easement, a pathway that gets them a connection in that way, which I think would maybe be something that might be of interest to them. We're going to maintain an easement for utilities anyway. We could do that for a bicycle and pedestrian path that would be on one side of it, still maintaining some access, which may be good for the neighborhood as well, to have pedestrian access over if this ever develops on that larger track. So we're open to that as a possibility that maybe would alleviate those concerns. And with that, I'm happy to answer your question. I do want to respond to that. Yes, by statute, it says that the ownership goes 1/2, 1/2, and that's by statute in the Oklahoma statutes. I think it was mentioned a judge can do differently. I've seen that happen once or twice where the judge does do the order of the decree differently by agreement of the parties. I think we had that near the old Johnny's happening that way, but typically it is 1/2 and 1/2. So happy to answer any questions you have.
Does the applicant own one of the adjacent properties?
They do. They own the one to the south. So applicant owns this house right there to the south. And that's one of their main concerns, that if that stays right away and then eventually gets connected as a full road, then these are just a little residential street area, and I think you would see cut-through traffic coming through from 12th Avenue up to Alameda. So that's one of the biggest concerns.
Is this the applicant's primary residence?
I believe it is, I think, correct? No, it's not. I'm sorry. I stand corrected, yes.
How does the applicant use the property currently?
I'm sorry?
How does the applicant use it currently?
I believe it's rent house.
Rent?
Yeah.
And does the applicant have any other future development plans that maybe this would be part of as a measure? I'm kind of maybe helping. I'd love to know the intent, because obviously you were hired to do this, and so there
Correct.
is a benefit.
Correct, yeah.
Usually I would guess there would be an impervious area maybe concern, or are there any that might be coming up that might be benefited by having it on there? But just making sure I understand the full scope of the desired project that this would
Yeah,
allow.
I don't think they really know what the future would be of the property. I think mostly that intent is, now that he's sort of handling the property, is to make sure that, again, in the future, this does not connect all the way through. That's really the concern. It's more of a protective measure than it is a future plans measure.
I heard mention of some easements. Do we know where those are?
Actually, the GIS, which I don't have a screenshot of you, shows the water and sewer going directly north and south, and staff may correct me if I'm wrong on that, but that's what I saw on GIS. I don't think there's much else going through there, but we're fully happy to retain easements for utilities as they need them, which could be important later on if they develop that tract.
Right. I mean, if there's a certain type of easement, then, they're not going to push traffic through there anyhow, so.
Yeah, this would be utility easements is what we
Okay.
would maintain, full utility easements. So all the utilities of the franchise holders, we call them, which would be electrical, gas, you guys, water.
City has nothing in this area. The utilities are on the eastern border overhead, which is OG&E and probably Cox and some other overhead utilities running north and south.
I have a question for the chairwoman and maybe for staff. If you were to add an easement, a pedestrian or bike easement here, when would that happen in the process? Would that be like a friendly amendment to do right now?
So I would say, and without giving the legal opinion for the city, that we could do a motion that was a contingent approval based on an additional pedestrian easement being in place, is maybe a way to have a modified rather than exactly as submitted. So we can make a motion that is different than as presented and include that in the motion. So, and it sounded like the applicant was in favor of making such a change. So I would say it would probably be best to put that in our motion if desired.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? That's okay, sorry. All right, I don't see any other questions for the applicant, so I'm going to move now to our audience comments. So I've got some names, I'm gonna call you up here, and you come up. If you don't mind speaking into the microphone and saying your name and address to start. You will get 3 minutes to speak. I will tell you that time goes faster than you'd think, so if you would like a little heads up 30 seconds before that time is up, I'll be glad to let you know. Otherwise, I'm going to give you the full 3 minutes, and at the end of that time, I'll thank you for your comments. So I'm going to the first person, Karen Dyers. Deers?
Can you call me Deers?
Yeah.
My name is Deers.
Deers, yes.
You call me Dyers.
Yeah, sorry, just a mispronunciation.
Well, my name is Karen Deers. I live at 212th Avenue Southeast. That is the 4-acre tract just east of this easement that we're talking about. My dad bought this farm and he built his home in 1951. And since I'm just turned 90, I've seen a lot of development over here and a lot of improvements and all. Every day I'm grateful that they left this easement for my west side entry to this property. There have been times when that opening has been absolutely essential to me, especially when they widened 12th Avenue. That was my only access into that property. And since then, the utility companies have come in through that gate to maintain the lines back there. My favorite thing of all is when my daughter's preschool can come hike from school over to have a nature experience in my backyard. There are 4 acres there, and it's absolutely a treasure of nature. So my hope is that this is rejected and that opening will stay accessible to me and my use. So if you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer anything.
Great, thank you very much, appreciate it. Appreciate you coming out.
How do you, I've got a quick.
I'm also hard of hearing, so you'll have to yell at me.
Okay, so I've got a quick question. What kind of vehicles do you use to access it right now?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Sky, you want to help me out?
Guy, do you want to help me?
Right, can I speak?
Yeah, go for it.
Loud, okay. Right now, you can see that the sucker trees have grown up, and it's been a while since we've used vehicles back there. That's always accessible. I mean, it's just on the table for us if we need it. My brother has brought big equipment in there. It grows up pretty fast, but the power companies have come in and used it. We have no intention of making a through street to 12th Street, so that's
So-
really not an issue.
Can I ask a follow-up?
And we'll give you a chance to give additional comments too, but for the vehicles, it sounds like they're not currently doing vehicular
It was her
access.
car when she used it,
Okay.
back when 12th Street was white.
Got it.
Thank
Actually,
you.
it was a Jeep. Any more questions?
I have one question.
Is that it?
I have one.
Oh, sorry.
If you had, I'll try not to use my microphone. If there were a utility easement, that would still let you get into the property. Is there something I'm not seeing about the utility easement being access for your vehicles? Am I misunderstanding?
What, the last ones that came in were the tree trimmers. They had the aerial equipment and all. That was a very large truck that came through there.
Thank you.
And they're welcome to do that anytime it's necessary for them to come through. But the west side opening is absolutely essential to me, you know, from my 4 acres.
Sure, thank you.
And Commissioner, I might be able to answer that question. So different uses, you think of property rights as a bundle of sticks. Utility use is one of the sticks. Access would be a different stick. So access would not necessarily be included within a utility easement for neighboring properties. It would have to be a separate agreement.
I see.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Moving now to Sky Deers.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
And just go ahead and say your name and address to start.
My name is Sky Deers. I live at 3605 Sun Valley Drive. I do have the nursery school that's around the corner, and we do walk and bike, and I appreciate the offer of a pedestrian way to get back to that property. And so that would be helpful, but I really am going to ask you to reject this because it's, the bad pavement was put in by the owner's father to park his RV, which was fine, and he used it to garden. That was also fine, but we really want to maintain that access to that property. It's 4 acres. While the 12th Street part might be commercial, that still can leave some other property that could be residential. Of course, it would be up to you guys to decide that, but we just want to keep all our options open. We don't want to close any doors for when that property is ultimately sold or I decide to bribe my brothers out or whatever. I don't see really the reason to take that off the table for us because we are also adjacent to this property. So I'm not quite sure why we should suffer for just because somebody else wants it. Any questions?
Thank you very much. We appreciate you
Thanks.
being here.
Appreciate it.
All right, moving on to discussion.
I'll say some things. I think I appreciate all the interest here, and I agree that you wouldn't want a road going through to a commercial district. I think that makes sense. But right now, it looks like it still is zoned residential. Well, so I've got 2 thoughts. One, I also appreciate that the family wants to have that rear access. That makes sense. And the walking easement, that makes sense also. But if it's currently zoned residential, why shouldn't they be able to keep their options open if they wanted to extend the neighborhood and keep it confined to that neighborhood, not let it connect to 12th, but keep it connected to the neighborhood? That seems reasonable, and it seems in keeping with the style and that closedness of the neighborhood. So while I do agree that no one would want to see it connect out to 12th or connect out to commercial, letting it connect to future residential development seems to make sense to me. Thank you.
Any other discussion? So something I just want to address that I thought was significant to just consider. The protest was a 36.9% protest, even as one person, the amount of land within the notification area. It was over a 1/3 area protest, which is just, I think, significant to note. I think this is an asset of that property, and I think we just need to be aware of that asset because it does affect what could be done, like the residential on there. So there is a potential financial implication to that neighbor by making this choice. That said, I was glad to hear that the applicant was willing to make some accommodations, and possibly even if there could be a private access agreement drawn up, maybe something like that continued allowing access, there might even be a workable solution that was even better than we talked about already. So
Yeah, the only comment I'll make is I was also glad to hear that there's an offer for a pedestrian or bicycle easement. Connectivity within neighborhoods is important. You see pedestrian and bicycle access on small strips throughout core Norman neighborhoods, and you don't see that quite as much in other areas of Norman, and any sort of connectivity there. That's essential in my mind, that you keep that level of connectivity. I'm still kind of weighing the options on whether you need vehicular access as well, so.
I feel like that if we do allow this, it limits what the future development of that adjacent property could be. If we leave this open, there's a potential that on the west side of that they could do a residential development and save their commercial space out on 12th Street. Whereas, it's going to be hard to commercialize that whole area and break it up in some way. So, that's my thoughts on it. I don't want to restrict. I don't want to restrict that, if that property ever becomes anything.
Any additional discussion? I would just add, if the motion was to approve with a pedestrian easement and with a right of access agreement, I would be in favor. So, seeing no other, then I would take a motion.
Move to reject.
In a second?
Second.
And a vote.
You may vote.
Yes to reject.
Okay, everyone has, and the motion carried 4-3.
And just for a point of order for clarification, since we don't usually get motions to reject, I just want to make sure we don't need to do any other motions at this point, correct? Beth is shaking her head no, so I think we're done with this item and it has been rejected. So, okay. All right, moving to item number 8, consideration of adoption, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of ordinance number O-2223-7, Classen Montessori School requests special use for a school to modify the approved site plan O-1819-29 for property located at 2323 South Classen Boulevard. And I'll take the staff presentation.
Colton Wayman with the Planning Department. We have an application from Classen Montessori School for a special use for a school to modify the approved site plan in addition to a variance to the City of Norman exterior masonry requirements located at 2323 South Classen Boulevard. The site is currently zoned R1 with special use for a school. To the north, it's zoned R1 with special use for a church in addition to the straight R1 zoning. To the east is R1 single-family dwelling district. And then to the south is also R1 single-family dwelling district. To the west is zoned planned unit development. This is the existing building footprint of the area. To the north is a church. Also to the north is some single-family homes. To the east are single-family homes. To the south is an existing church. And to the west is an apartment complex. This is an aerial of the site as it exists currently. This is the proposed site plan from the applicant. To the southwest, they're proposing a portable building to be put in. And then in addition, at a later date, they're proposing for a portable building to the northwest of the site with 3 additional parking spaces and a queuing lane for pickup and drop off. This is looking at the site from Classen Boulevard. This is looking north on Classen at the church. This is looking west at the apartment complex. This is south on Classen, the church that exists currently. This is looking at the general location of that proposed portable building. And then this is that east lot line that abuts the single-family residential. The applicant is requesting to amend the special use for a school to revise the site plan approved with ordinance O1819-29 and to remove the City of Norman exterior masonry requirements. Staff forwards this request to amend the site plan and a variance to exterior masonry requirements as ordinance number O2223-7 for consideration by the Planning Commission. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for staff?
I'm just curious, if this were a public school, would they also have to come and ask permission?
Yes, they would. Because any school is a special use.
So I'm going to look to our legal, but I believe that the Norman Public Schools do not come to Planning Commission and City Council for any of their applications and rezonings and such.
Okay, it's a tricky thing because both answers are right. Schools in general are the special use as it's defined, but technically as a matter of jurisdiction, there is an issue as to whether or not, in most circumstances, that they would have to acknowledge our zoning authority. So yes and no.
Great.
Sorry about that.
That clarified it. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, I would move to an applicant presentation if there's one. No? Oh, yeah. That's okay. Yeah. If there's no presentation, we can just move to applicant questions. Seeing none, I would take any audience comments. And then seeing none, I would move to discussion.
I'll just say, I asked because it seemed kind of silly to hold, a private school to a different standard than it does a public school for adding these kinds of buildings. I mean, it looks like the neighborhood supports it, and it looks great, so I support it.
Thank you.
Second that. We got 2 support letters, and at the pre-development meeting, there was also support by neighbors. So it's always nice to see when people are already in support of things before it comes to us. So, yeah. If there's no other discussion, I would take a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
And a vote.
You may vote. Everyone has voted. Carried 7-0.
Great, thank you. Moving to item number 9, consideration of adoption, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of ordinance number O-2223-11. Timber Creek Fellowship Church requests special use for a church, temple, or other place of worship to modify the approved site plan O-0203-21 for property located at 4600 36th Avenue Northwest. Staff presentation.
Golden Wayne with the Planning Department. We have an application from Timber Creek Fellowship Church for a special use for a church, temple, or other place of worship to modify the approved site plan located at 4600 36th Avenue Northwest. The tract is currently zoned R1 with special use for a church. To the north is zoned C1 Local Commercial District, and then to the west and south, it's zoned R1 Single Family Dwelling District. To the east is zoned Parkland. This is the building footprint. To the north, it is currently vacant. To the west and south, it's single-family homes. To the east is Ruby Grant Park. This is the aerial of the site as it exists currently. This is the proposed site plan from the applicant. To the east of the existing structure, the applicant is proposing a sanctuary in addition to a separate building for church offices. At a later date, the church is requesting to potentially add another sanctuary, 17,000 square foot sanctuary to the west of the existing building, in addition to a new surface lot to the east of that proposed church office. This is a rendering of the site as it exists currently. This is looking at the site from 36th Avenue Northwest. This is looking south on 36th. This is looking north on 36th with that vacant lot. This is looking east at Ruby Grant Park. This is along the western part of that building, the southern lot line of that parcel. This is at the western part of the parcel with the storage building and the pavilion and the single-family homes that abut. This is looking at the southern part of the existing structure where they're proposing a potential sanctuary at a later date. This is looking at the northern part of that building, and then to the left of that building is where they're proposing that church office building. And that's looking at that vacant lot to the north. The applicant is requesting to amend the site plan for a church approved with Ordinance O-0203-21. Staff forwards this request to amend the existing site plan as proposed by Ordinance number O-2223-11 for consideration by the Planning Commission. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions for staff?
Quick question, is there already a detention pond, or is that just for the proposed?
Yes, sir, there is. There's two detention ponds to the east of the site. If I can find the aerial. This is the proposed site plan, but you can see those two detention ponds that are right next to 36th Avenue.
And those are and there won't be any more added on?
No, sir, there won't.
Okay.
So there's been a lot of concern with this one and the drainage. I think that's what overall stood out on that. And then, we're talking about some pretty major expansions and impervious surfaces, all that. I see there's a note on the site plan that says that it has an underground storm drainage system. I'm wondering, empirically, it doesn't seem like it's working. So what, has staff looked into why there's drainage issues if we have capacity for future build out, but it's not working as the existing?
Yeah, that came up in our pre-development meeting also. The applicant has proposed some ways to address that, and he has a presentation after this where he covers
Okay.
those drainage issues.
Okay.
We have some extra hands coming up to help.
Yeah, Commissioner Parker, I'm Todd McClellan, the development engineer. I was just going to state that there was an expansion, I think in 2016 or 2015, where they actually added that north detention pond, and they built a private storm sewer to the west and to the north to accommodate the future expansion. So the new parking lot and buildings, all that drainage is going to be picked up by the existing storm sewer that they put in 2016 or 2015, I don't remember the exact year. And also, I believe the drainage concern from the neighbors is there's a berm back there to the west, and I think the neighbor's concern is that limits the water, their water from going to the east into the storm sewer system. And the church is going to give a presentation here, but I believe they're willing to work with the neighbors to address that, to pick that water up.
Okay, thanks, Todd.
I have a question for staff for clarification. So on our site plan, we have proposed buildings and possible future structures. I just want to clarify that when we approve this site plan, it in essence also approves those further future developments as well. They would not need to come in front of Planning Commission again.
Yes, that's true.
Great. Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, I would take the applicant's presentation.
Good evening. I'm Rick McKinney with McKinney Partnership Architects at 3600 West Main, and I represent the applicant, Timber Creek Church. How does this work? Which one do I push to go? That moves it forward? Okay. They've addressed a little bit of the drainage, and I'll get into that in just a moment, but I did want to, are mine just after this? Okay, this is a rendered version. This is what exists today, and the drainage in question, well, let me jump forward. This would help a little bit, but our plans are to build an expansion to the north and an expansion to their current fellowship hall, and that's shown on this site plan. The green boxes, the lower right-hand green box is actually an extension of a current fellowship hall, and that will be our interim sanctuary in the beginning. And then the upper green box is for offices and another meeting space. As he mentioned, our permanent sanctuary would be that kind of diamond shape that's dashed in to the left of the blue. The shaded areas in the parking lot, those are new parking spaces. All of that parking and all of the building drainage right now is funneled directly into those two detention ponds at the front left and right of the entryway. And by the way, those detention ponds are sized already to handle the entire master plan. We're working with the engineer that did the expansion in 2015, and we've confirmed that those detention ponds were sized for the master plan. And so what we're asking tonight is actually just a modification to a site plan amendment to the permissive use that's already in place. This drawing, as you can see, the blue dashes, phase 2 that was done in 2015, apparently may have been some drainage issues back then. I don't know. But as you can see, the boxes on the left-hand side of the drawing, and then the dash lines, there's an underground drainage system, a private storm sewer that was installed by the church, which was North Haven Church, in 2015. I've looked at the engineering drawings. The problem is that each one of those rectangular boxes, those are actual area drains in that entire area. And when the engineer designed it, he indicated to create kind of a swale around each drain. Well, when they did that, I believe they pushed dirt up against the west fence and created what Todd was referring to as a berm, and which prohibited that natural drainage from their yard to flow to the east. And we have met with the owners at the pre-development meeting. I have walked the site. I've located all of those drains. Only 2 of those drains are open right now. The rest are covered with mud, and there's no drainage going through. So that has a big impact as well. But what we haven't engineered this yet, but what we'd like to do would be to either regrade that or possibly even extend drains from those westernmost boxes to their backyards, to where they could have direct access to the storm system that's already in place. And we've mentioned both of those ideas, and I think they're receptive to any of those. But we would commit to work closely with the landowners on the west to satisfy that drainage. There's another question that came up. I got a call when this was first, the mailers first went out, about light fixtures that were having some glare into the houses on the south. And I've committed to them that we will either put shrouds or we may change out the heads to LED lamps and have it like dark skies, so it would all be on the parking lot, and we'd prevent any light from going to the neighborhood to the south. Those are the only 2 concerns we had. The parking is generous. Normally, churches require 4 seats in the sanctuary, gets 1 parking space. And we have a ratio of 2.5 seats per parking space, so it's almost double what's typically required for church. So we're providing additional parking there as well. And I'd be happy to entertain any questions you might have.
I had one question regarding the original site plan versus what's being proposed here. The original site plan, are the square footages comparable to what's being proposed in future sanctuary, or are you adding square footage?
The diamond area right now is just a concept, and it's roughly 17,000 feet. The green area to the north is, I think, the sanctuary extension we're doing at the lower side is about 4,100 square feet. And then the one up above, the offices and the meeting space is, I think originally it was around 5,500, and now we're at 6,700 on the ground. The offices would have a second level just on the left-hand side. But we're in design phases right now as far as what is specifically required.
But it's roughly comparable to the original site plan?
Yes.
Any other questions for the applicant?
What year was the storm drain thing put in?
2015.
And was that put in with the original development?
No.
Or, so what I'm looking at is there's a whole bunch of inlets over there, and it looks like that they were put in to try to solve a problem.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, because I mean, it just doesn't look, so they were already fighting drainage on that backside, and now they're trying to solve a problem that's really hasn't been fixed. I don't see any issue with what the future development, but I think there's some validity to what the adjacent properties are saying of they're having drainage issues.
Absolutely.
They've put in, I would say, $20,000, $30,000 worth of drainage pipe, and there's still an issue. So I would look at, you know, if they're going to be doing a significant amount of work, that they need to fully address that, you know, in the design phase and get it cleaned up and make it work.
Exactly. I believe that that drainage system put in that back grass area was put in as hopefully a solution to solve the drainage issue that was going on with the houses. When they put the drains in, they moved dirt around and made it even worse, I feel. And so now we'll get rid of the problem that's causing that.
Yeah.
And we'll allow water to flow off the site or into drains that will extend to their fence line to tie into this drainage. The storm sewer works fine. The grates are just covered with mud and grass about 2 inches thick.
Yeah.
And they're not even open, so that will help a lot. But
You know, I wouldn't even mind seeing another smaller detention pond in the northwest corner and use that one inlet as a control structure to push water out to the front drainage ponds if needed. But that would give you the opportunity to fully regrade that area and bring it down.
I don't think we'll need that because we would knock down that grade from where their yards are now.
Yeah, yeah.
And we'll
Well, as
pick
long
up
as whatever they're doing, if they're not developing that, to get it to flow away from the property.
Right. Well, I can commit to this board and to the neighbors that we will work closely with them to solve that problem.
Okay.
And we have an engineer that is aware of it, and he's already on it, so.
That's a question, I guess, did you get an engineer's report already for the drainage, or do you have a prior one from maybe the 2015 or from the previous owners?
I have the drawings that were done in 2015.
Okay.
Shows all the pipe, all the grates, all the slopes. It's all engineered just fine. It's just the dirt is not allowing the water to get to the drains. So,
Yeah. All right. Any other questions for the applicant?
thank you.
No, thank you. Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and move to audience comments. If anybody would like to come make a comment, just a reminder, if you don't mind filling out a tan sheet, say your name and address in 3 minutes. Okay, seeing none, I would move to Planning Commission discussion. I'm really interested to hear what Kevin thinks about this. More calling you out.
Well, like I said, I don't see any other issues there, other than the drainage. What I was telling Cameron, it kind of looks like we went out and saw, oh, there's standing water here, there's standing water here, there's standing water here, and we just started popping in drains to try to collect this without, and then doing very minor drainage around it. I don't know, Rick, what size pipe is that? So it's a 6-inch drain line? Yeah, so there's a potential that they're just clogged up and can be pushed out. But there again, I think using some natural ground to divert it and maybe even connect it straight into that 12-inch would be beneficial. So that's all I got.
I would have the concerns about drainage, and as we make a motion to approve, maybe with modification, that is absolutely addressed.
Maybe I have a question for staff and maybe a point of order, but the site plans would not typically be required to show drainage improvements, or would it be as part of this application? Would drainage improvements possibly be shown on a site plan? Because that's really what our motion is to approve today.
I'm thinking. I've never been asked that before, but historically, we have had the site plan. And when the building permit comes in is when any of those issues would be reviewed by the different departments. I'm looking to Todd if he has anything else. I mean, shake your head yes or no, I don't know. But historically, we have not discussed these issues at Planning Commission.
I also think it depends on the situation.
Right.
If it's part of plating, then yes, the drainage is shown because
Right.
it's part of the plating
And
process.
this is an existing one,
Right.
right?
That's a great question. Thanks. Appreciate that. All right. Any other discussion?
It seems this has been a problem for a long time, and it's a little bothersome that it hasn't been resolved. You know, if it were resolved before today, you know, by regrading or flushing out or whatever you have to do, then we wouldn't have to worry about it being a future problem. It seems like it's been a problem for 6 years.
Yeah, I think most plans are great, but plans also need to continue to be utilized. So if there's not a maintenance agreement, for example, that, you know, requires things to be cleaned out, you can always install, but that's one of those things that's on there. So maintenance agreements would be a way to kind of hold somebody responsible for those, and then just being good and neighborly, which,
Can I, is this, I think this is a new owner of a property. So the old owner may not have performed the maintenance required in order to solve the problem. And I think with the new ownership, they've seemed to be committed to fixing the issues with the berm on the back, fixing the issues with the 2 inches or whatever of mud over the drains. To me, that, I think if those things are fixed, it should be fairly easy to take care of the issue.
Yeah, I would offer that this previous church was North Haven, and it has since been sold to Tim Creek. Pastor Bruce Rosedal's here, and he can reinforce what I'm saying, but the new owners, we are committed to solving this problem, whatever it takes.
I'll also.
We don't have it designed yet, but we have some options that we know will work.
I've got an additional note that at the pre-development meeting, they started engaging in these conversations, which, just like the other comments, when I always really like to see when an applicant has made a point to try and work this out with the neighbors without just trying to go directly to the city. So I think that they've shown goodwill with that already with some of that. My only other thoughts is if we want to memorialize it to be required, it has to be on the document being approved. What we're approving is a site plan, not necessarily everything else. So if somebody wanted to make a requirement that any drainage improvements proposed be included on the site plan, you might want to make that in the motion. Otherwise, just remembering we're here for a site plan today. That's the motion here. And that these other issues would also still come up through the building permitting process too. So 2 different points when we kind of look at this. Open for any other discussion. Okay. Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
Well, I just moved to approve as presented.
Second.
And a vote.
You may vote. Everyone has voted, and the motion carried 6-1.
All right, moving to miscellaneous discussion. Does staff have any information for the commission? If commissioners have any comments to make, I'd like to welcome our new commissioner. Welcome, and we're so glad to have you here and completely understand why you picked better reasons for the day of the meeting for your wedding. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
I want to know if staff can, when we prepare presentations, take screenshots off a PDF instead of scanning them in so that they're clear when we see them here. I don't know why we can't screenshot vector images and keep them clear in the presentation. And they almost look like they're scanned from paper and then put in. I don't know. That we take screenshots off of a vector image, and that's what we use in the presentations.
Or just use the vector image instead of a screenshot.
Or just use the vector image.
Or an original PDF that you could
Right.
zoom in on, for example.
Exactly, so that when we see it here, it's clear. I mean, yeah, I mean, some of them that we receive.
For our program, I believe it has to be a PDF that's loaded, so we'll have to work on getting original PDFs. We can't put those images in the Legistar document, I believe.
Okay.
Or Municode, sorry, we're on a different one now, yeah.
I don't think we get vector images, but we get a nice image in our packet, though, too. It's a
Yeah.
little bit, yeah.
Yeah, just these here, if we have them digitally, they should be able to come here relatively easy. I just look at it.
Good comment. Any other comments? If there's nothing more to come before the commission, I declare us adjourned.